So let's learn how to factor a little bit. All right, so really quickly, let's talk about this. As I was saying before, this is exactly what we did yesterday. This is exactly what we did yesterday. It's just set up differently, right? But like I said, you have to, Avery Davis, turn it face down. That way it's not so tempting. There you go. Um, you have to learn to apply the information in a way that's different. I'm not just going to teach you something and then test you teaching it exactly the same way. That doesn't require thought. Okay? But once you understand that division is simply reverse multiplication, then we can simply set up our box. And we can put 2x minus 3 on the outside of the box, and we can put 8x squared and negative 3 in and begin working our way backwards, which puts 4x here, which puts positive 1 here, right? Based off the 4x times 2x equals 8x squared, and 1 times negative 3 equals negative 3. And then we go ahead and fill in these diagonals. This would be positive 2x. This would be negative 12x. And we're doing that so that we make sure that our sum equals that b term. It does, so we know that the answer to this division problem is 4x plus 1. The answer to that division problem is 4x plus 1, right? So, again, don't just look at something and go, oh, I've never seen that before. I don't know how to do that. Think. Need you thinking. Good to go? Any questions about that? You just got your homework back. Any questions on homework before we jump into factoring? The mistakes, most of y'all did really, really well on the GCF one. The only issues that I saw were sometimes some random positive, negative, or not following steps all the way through, okay? Things like that. So make sure we're doing that. So now we're going to learn how to find dimensions when we're only given the area. We're going to learn how to find dimensions when we're only given the area. Now, yesterday, we were given all 4 sections, right? I gave you the area, but I set up the entire box so that you had the top left, top right, bottom left, and bottom right. And then you just found the GCF, right? Remember, you found the GCF and worked your way around. This time, I'm simply going to give you the 3 terms that you end up with, that trinomial, and we're going to work our way backwards. So I'm going to go through this really quickly. Remember, some of it may not make sense right away, and then we'll get into the application. It'll start to make more sense. There are specific steps you are going to follow when you're factoring a quadratic using the box method. When you factor a quadratic using the box method, there are specific steps I want you to follow. The very first thing you're going to do is you're going to multiply the a and the c values together. The very first thing you're going to do is you're going to multiply the a and the c values together. Where do we find the a value in a quadratic? It's in front of the x squared guy. Where do we find the c? It's the last one, or the constant. Now remember, remember back when we were first learning about quadratics, I said make certain that it's in standard form, meaning the x squared is first, and then the x guy, and then the constant. Still a checklist in your head. Make sure that they're in order so that when you look, you're looking at the a value or the c value if they're in the right order. You are going to find the factors of the product from step 1. Meaning once you multiply a times c, it's going to give you a product, a number. And you're going to factor that number. Now yesterday we learned how to factor using a calculator. How do we factor using a calculator? Y equals the number divided by x. And you are welcome to do that. You are welcome to do that, okay? In fact, I would recommend you do that. You're going to determine which factors, which pairs of factors you can add or subtract to get your b value. You're going to decide which factors you can add or subtract to get your b value. You're going to choose the signs, meaning positive or negative, for your factors so that the product, meaning when you multiply those 2 numbers, you get the product of a times c, and the sum is b. And again, all this is going to make sense in just a second. Just write all this in. Andrew, thank you. Your factors represent the coefficients of your x terms. As soon as I get that moved, it will say x terms. and they're going to use that information to set up our box and fill in all the outside stuff. I'm going to let everyone write all this junk in, and we'll talk, and then I'll show you what all this looks like in like real world. Okay. If I use the numbers 5 and 3, if I use the numbers 5 and 3, and I say how many different products can you make from 5 and 3, if you could make them positive or negative. So what I mean by that is, so we know that positive 5 times positive 3 equals 15, right? Negative 5 times negative 3 equals negative 15. Negative 5 times negative 3 equals positive 15. And 5 times negative 3 equals negative 15. Are there any other combinations of 5 and 3 from a multiplication standpoint that we could do? No, because you can only make them either positive or negative. Now what if so this is products, because it's multiplication. What are the sums of those same combinations? What's the sum of 5 and 3? 8. The next sum, negative 2. What's the sum of the next one? The sum of the next one, positive 2. So even though we have matching products, we don't have matching sums, right? And you really have to be able to consider, guys, both the products and the sums when you're determining the factoring. And let me show you what it all looks like. Now, I want you to watch me do the first one, and then we'll do a second one together, and then we'll practice. So here are my steps. The very first thing I want you to do is look at the quadratic and make certain it's in standard form. Is it in standard form? And standard form means the x squared guys first, then the x guy, then the constant. Is that in standard form? It is. So right off the bat, we know that our a value is what? 12, and our b value is? And our c value is? Negative 2. So step 1 says to multiply a and c together, right? So what is a times c? Negative 24. A times c is negative 24. And our b value is 5. Now what that means is when we factor negative 24, we want to find two numbers that when multiplied together get negative 24, but when added together get you positive 5. That's the goal. The goal is to find the factors of negative 24 that multiply together to get you negative 24 and add to get you 5. Now, what you need to do right off the bat is we are going to factor 24, and I'm not going to let you use a calculator on this one because you shouldn't. But what are the factors of 24? Let's go through them all real quick. 1 and 24, right? 2 and 12, 3 and 8, and 4 and 6. Are there any other factors of 24? There are not. There are not. Watch, make sure we're watching. Which combination pair could be multiplied to get negative 24 and added to get 5, Ethan? If we turn the 3 negative, 3 and 8 can be. So basically what we can say is that negative 3 times 8 gets us negative 24, and negative 3 plus 8 gets us 5. Now, it's important when you set these up that these are the same guys and these are the same. Because you can't change them from one to the next or you're defeating the whole purpose. Now, does anybody not know how we came up with negative 3 and 8 to use so that their products equal negative 24 and their sum equals 5? Cool. What that means is negative 3x and 8x are our x terms to be used in our box. Now watch the way this works. What always goes in the top left-hand corner of the box? The x squared guy, right? So we write 12x squared. What always goes in the bottom right? In this case, c, or negative 2. Agreed? And in the diagonals, We put these guys. And it doesn't matter where you put them. You can put them however you want to. I'm going to put 8x here, and I'm going to put negative 3x right there. Now, once we get all four set up, what's the first one I want you to always find on the outside? Where is it? This guy right here. What's the GCF of 12x squared and 8x? 4x. Very good. And now we start working our way around the horn. 4x times what gets us 12x squared? Very good. 4x times what gets us 8x? Positive, no, not 2x. Positive 2. And 3x times what gets us that? Negative 1. Now, what did I tell you yesterday is your last and final check before you move forward? Do you remember? Yeah, make sure, not the diagonals, making sure that this times this gets us this. Need to make that a part of your mental checklist. Now, if everything's said and done, then my factors are 4x minus 1 and 3x plus 2. That's it. Done. So again, A times C and B. You got to get those guys because you go ahead and fill them in right here. The product of A times C has to go there, and the product of B goes here. And then when you factor, you write that factor tree, you're looking for the pair that when added together gets you B, but when multiplied together gets you that A times C number. And once you know that's the guy, those are your X terms, you fill in your box, you move forward. Let's try another one. Okay. So right off the bat, is it in standard form? It is. Perfect. So what is A times C in this problem? Negative 6, because it's 1 times negative 6. And what is our B value? Negative 5. We factor the net. And by the way, if you want to right now, you can go ahead and fill in. The negative 6 goes here, and the negative 5 goes here. That's generally what I do. Now I'm going to factor the negative 6. Well, I'm actually just going to factor 6. You're really factoring negative 6, but I just factor the positive number, and I got to consider which one gets negative. Now, what are the factors of 6? 1 and 6 and 2 and 3. Fantastic. 1 and 6 and 2 and 3. Now, which pair, when added together, could get us negative 5, but when multiplied gets us negative 6? Madison? 1 and negative 6. Now, could we add negative 2 and negative 3 and get negative 5? But why is that wrong, Tristan? Because you can't multiply them and get a negative, right? See why you have to make sure both work. So we say, okay, so it's 1 times negative 6 and 1 times negative 6. It works here and it works here, which means our x terms are 1x and negative 6x. Now let's fill in the box. So we put x squared here, we put minus 6 here, and then we take our x terms we just found, 1x, negative 6x, and now we're ready to start factoring. We pull the GCF out first right here. What's the GCF of x squared and 1x? X. X times x times positive 1, x times minus 6. I do my double check and make sure that works, which means my factors are x plus 1 and x minus 6. And by the way, just to be clear, what we're basically determining, if we FOIL this, what are we going to get? We're going to get this trinomial. Very good. That's the way it works. Ask your question, Ethan. What do you compute? This is the C. Next. Thank you. Okay. Good to go? Try that one yourself. Try that one yourself. Go slowly. Take your time. love you. That's not right. 6 times 12 is not 48. Okay, so my A value is 6, and my C value is negative 12, which makes my A times C negative 72. My B value is 1, right? So I need to factor 72 so that the product is negative 72 and the sum is 1, right? So I go through that list. And by the way, if you want to factor 72 using your calculator, feel free, because the table will list you all those factors. But doing it yourself is just 1 and 72 and 2 and 36 and 3 and 24 and 4 and 18, holy smokes, 5, 6 and 12, 7, 8, and 9. So which combination set gets us that, Carden? Negative 8 and positive 9. Be very careful about those, right? So we know that it's negative 8 and positive 9 because it works here and it works here. If I told you the one mistake that is most often made, that's it. That is it. Where you forget that their sum is a positive 1, not a negative 1. You're not paying attention to where the negative guy goes. So once we know that, then we know it's negative 8x and positive 9x. So it's negative 8x and positive 9x. On the diagonals, we fill in everything else, 6x squared minus 12, and then we begin the GCF process, right? GCF is 3x, 3x times 2x, 2x times negative 4, 3x times positive 3. We make sure that works, and we end up with 3x minus 4 and 2x plus 3. Done. Any questions on that? All right, you have classwork. Do not start your homework early. Use your classwork, use the keys. This is critically an important day. Make sure you got your classwork, make sure you're checking the keys before you jump into homework. Okay? Nice job.